Hi, this is Mike Smith with SAECO. I thought we could just take a minute, talk a little bit about geotechnical engineering and our company. I think our company is pretty typical of the geotechnical consulting firms that are out there. A lot of us offer geotechnical engineering, construction QA, QC, and also environmental services because a lot of our clients need all of those on the same site. So how I arrived in this industry, everybody's a little bit different, but I have a 4-year degree. Took me 5 years, but I got a 4-year degree, a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering. And I actually started out doing environmental consulting. And one day, someone knocked at my door and said, you know, we could use a guy like you in our materials testing department. And I've always been the kind like, okay, why not? I could learn some more. I didn't really like the environmental stuff anyway, being a civil engineer. And so it was sold to me as, we just kind of need you for the summer and then you can kind of go back to what you're doing. And that was the summer of 1995, and I'm still doing what I was supposed to do that summer. So my summer internship turned into be a little bit more than that. You know, a lot of civil engineers go into more of the design aspects of our industry, probably better than 75%. But there are those of us that get into the construction quality assurance, quality control, and geotechnical fields. It is a specialty. It usually takes a little bit more schooling as well. And Justin just joined our firm earlier this year, but perhaps you could discuss some of the career moves you made. You got a little bit different academic background than me, and talk about that for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Mike. And I started about 5 years ago. I went and got a degree, bachelor's degree in geological engineering. And basically, I remember I went and took a geology class, and I was enamored with geology. And my professor in that class said, you know what, if you want to do the geology route, that's great, but you need to add engineering to the back end of it because otherwise you're not going to make money. And so I did it. I ended up going to the University of Alaska Fairbanks, and just like Mike, it took me 5 years for a 4-year degree. And I think that's kind of typical for engineering. And so at the end of that 5 years, my wife and I decided to move back to Arizona. And really, there was a lot of opportunities down here, but it was all in the construction, QA, QC, geotechnical field. And that's kind of where I got my start. And so I did that for about 4 years before, 4 or 5 years before I joined Mike with Smith & Anala. And it's been a good opportunity so far.
Yeah, I kind of describe it like probably for every 10 of us that are involved in construction QA testing, there's one geotech engineer. It might even be less than that, right?
Right.
And then what we wanted to touch on too was this, when we do geotechnical engineering, what the usual outcome of that is a geotechnical report, also referred to as a soils report. Every company has their own kind of templates and formats that they use for those. A lot of the larger national companies have tried to standardize those reports across the company, or across the country, I should say. But what we're attempting to show in that soils report is the collection of data from both the drilling activities, the lab testing, any other findings we may have, and even sometimes we may have other data because some part of the site may have had some other soils or earthwork activity on it. And that's where we present to the design team what we feel are the recommendations for what the bearing capacities are going to be for that site. So maybe Justin, you could kind of talk about how you go through that process and how much time it takes to, kind of gather things and get something out to a client.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to start with kind of a little bit of a story, if I may. There was a project I was involved with. It was a really well-known client here in Arizona, and we had a meeting with the client, and they had a designer on their team. And during the meeting, the designer asked us, why are we spending so much money on something nobody's ever going to see? And I feel like a lot of people ask that question. They kind of wonder, why are we spending so much money on a geotechnical report or on the foundations? I mean, it kind of doesn't make sense intuitively, but realistically, if you don't, your building's not going to stand, right?
Yeah.
Something's going to happen. And so that's why you need to invest at the very beginning of your project in these geotechnical reports, because they're not like these templates. They're just templates. They're not one size fits all. Really, these geotechnical reports are custom for each and every site. You could literally have the exact same building, the exact same loads, the exact same structure on sites that are a mile apart, but the geotechnical report is not going to be the same for each of them, because the soils under each building are going to be different. And so that's really kind of the what I want to get across to you, is that this is going to be custom. And so that's why we do the drilling. That's why we make the recommendations that we do, and why things can change. And so when we go out there and we do the drilling, when we go out there and we do the research, we look at the history of the site, when we look at the seismic characteristics, when we look at all of these different things, we're taking a holistic approach, because there's so many different things that can affect the recommendations that we are going to give you as a client, as a contractor, as a designer, that we're going to put into this report. And so literally we are putting in a dozen, at least 12 to 24 hours easy on just a basic geotechnical report. And that's just a small geotechnical report. Sometimes we're putting in even more than that for larger projects.
Now, is it commonplace to go to the site before you scope out what the potential conditions might be, or can you just glean that from past site uses and other sources?
So, in an ideal world, we would love to visit every single site before we put out a scope and a quote, right? But obviously, that doesn't happen every single time. But if we do get a project, if it does become our project, obviously a site visit is going to be number one priority. We want to make sure we are out there and looking at the entire big picture before we do anything. And then communication is key with the client. We want to make sure we know what the client is doing, what they're designing, what they're going to do with that project, so we can adequately scope the drilling and what we are going to ultimately recommend.
Yeah. Good. Well, good. Well, we hope this adds to the value of kind of understanding how we arrive at geotechnical recommendations and the report that carries that information. Of course, that report has the recommendations, as well as all the summary of the laboratory testing that we did to arrive at that. And often it's included with the construction documents that you'll be looking at during the bidding process. Thank you.